American Horror Story has covered plenty of terrifying ground, so there are bound to have been some huge hits and some big misses along the way. Here are some of the best and worst episodes of Ryan Murphy's horror anthology juggernaut. American Horror Story broke onto the scene with Murder House, a traditional haunted house story of a dysfunctional family who unwittingly move into a doomed new home. The Harmon family are trying to weather plenty of family issues, including Ben's affair and Vivian's miscarriage, and encounter a number of odd neighbors, including the brooding Tate and the controlling Constance, as they uncover the dark history of the house.
Why'd you move here?
My dad had an affair. My mom literally caught him in the act.
That's horrible.
In Piggy, the season's 6th episode, one specific mystery is solved. It turns out Tate is not a neighbor at all, but a ghost who resides in the house. Tate, however, is unaware that he is dead, and audiences are introduced to Billy Dean Howard, a medium who can help him with this discovery. In classic AHS tradition, the episode is jam-packed, including a revelation that Vivian is pregnant with the Antichrist, and a subplot involving one of Ben's troubled psychiatry patients. But the emotional core remains with Violet and Tate, who confess their love for one another and stand by each other through each frightening realization that they encounter. Though it wasn't immediately obvious that Colt would focus on the 2016 election, Murphy announced the inspiration before it aired, setting audiences up for what was sure to be a polarizing season. With regulars Sarah Paulson and Evan Peters taking the helm as a liberal snowflake and a power-hungry right-winger respectively, the season had a strong concept. Unfortunately, in standard American Horror Story fashion, it tried a little too hard to juggle too much, including more unnerving neighbors, a succession of influential cult leaders, a roving band of killer clowns, and more. The 7th episode of the 7th season, Valerie Solanas Died for Your Sins, Scumbag, utilizes a relatively clumsy flashback to feminist figure Valerie Solanas, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968 at the factory as an act of rebellion.
Who are you kidding? Shooting me will be the only thing you'll be remembered for. I am your legacy.
Though this did actually happen and Solanas was a real person, the script takes some fairly wild liberties with her story, suggesting that somehow she was responsible for all the Zodiac Killer correspondence. Yeah, it was kind of a big mess, and all its muddled story beats made for an unsatisfying episode. One of the more whimsical seasons of the show, the 3rd season of American Horror Story, focuses on a coven led by Fiona Good, played by Jessica Lange, the ruling supreme who will do anything to hold on to her throne. Meanwhile, the young witches in Fiona's coven attend a unique academy, with Good's daughter Cordelia acting as headmistress. Throughout the season, each witch hones her powers, wielding them against outside forces while fine-tuning them in hopes of becoming the next supreme. The season premiere, Bitchcraft, gives viewers a perfect introduction to the season's enormous coterie of characters, which will only grow throughout the season, setting up the fight for Supreme, as well as introducing us to a couple of truly terrifying villains. Throughout all of this setup, the premiere doesn't feel clumsy or expositional, but rather like it's prepping viewers for the emotional and pulse-pounding roller coaster we've been waiting for.
Jesus, Sabrina, relax. We're just messing with you.
Though Coven was a positively received season, and it began with a proverbial bang, it ended with a whimper. With the season building to one question, who will be the next Supreme, the Coven of Witches are all prepared to battle it out for the title. As each witch makes her way through the tests, she's stumped by one element or another. In the end, Cordelia winds up coming through as the Supreme, which after pitting the girls against each other all season feels utterly underwhelming, and a little bit like a cop-out.
Having fun yet?
Yeah, it's a real party.
Even an appearance by Stevie Nicks, who opens the episode with a short impromptu music video, can't save this lukewarm finale, which culminates in Fiona finding herself trapped in her own personal hell, being stuck in an old farmhouse for eternity with her former lover, the Axeman. Watching Jessica Lange frantically scream about the house's foundations does elicit some chuckles, but as a whole, this ending doesn't do any service to the roller coaster of a season that preceded it. When it comes to American Horror Story, it's not uncommon for a season to premiere strong, only to start losing steam as plots become more and more convoluted and characters come and go. Freak Show is no exception. Even though the season ranks quite low among the others, Monsters Among Us is a standout episode in its own right. Audiences meet Elsa Mars, played by Jessica Lange in her final full season of American Horror Story, as she rescues conjoined twins Bet and Dot from a hospital, only to place them in her freak show. The episode also seamlessly introduces Twisty, a terrifying murderous clown, as well as socialite Gloria Mott and her deranged son Dandy.
How's that?
Better. The seat's warm.
Mother made a toasty for you.
Gross. Anyway, to cap it all off, Elsa performs a David Bowie song, the aptly named Life on Mars to be precise, to close out the episode and reveals her own secret. She's a double amputee. The premiere of Freak Show is an excellent example of a successful start. It expertly sets up the rest of the season, and despite the lackluster episodes that follow, it remains one of the standouts of the entire series. Even though it had an extraordinarily strong start, Freak Show, much like its predecessor Coven, ended with a fizzle. Most of the finale focuses on Elsa herself, who moves to Hollywood and marries an executive, but allows herself to be escorted to the afterlife by the ghost of Edward Mordrake, who kills any freak that performs on Halloween. Why? Because American Horror Story. That's why.
The day of reckoning is here.
It hurts, but only for a moment.
In her final performance, she sings David Bowie's Heroes, before being gently escorted back to the Freak Show, where her deceased brethren are waiting with open arms. Though it seems like a fairly warm and happy ending to such a violent season, it not only leaves plenty of narrative threads in the dust, it's also a straight-up dull closing to an arc that once held so much promise. Unlike Asylum, which proves closure by giving Lana Winters one last act of revenge, Freak Show pretends it's giving viewers a satisfying ending, when ultimately, it looks more like the showrunners weren't sure where to go with such a challenging and off-the-wall season.
The sins of the living don't add up to much around here. In life, we play the parts we're cast in.
It's consistently ranked as the best season of the entire series, so it's difficult to choose the best episode of Asylum. The finale, in which Lana Winters takes her revenge on her murderous son and triumphs by force of sheer will, was a strong contender, but the top spot has to go to Name Game. If only for the trippy, out-of-place dance sequence starring Jessica Lange from which the episode takes its title. Yeah, it's a wacky one in all the right ways. This episode is a perfect showcase for the best of everything that American Horror Story has to offer. Sheer fantasy, indelible images, and dramatic moments, including a touching turn by Frances Conroy as the Angel of Death, who arrives to collect the dead throughout the episode. When it's at the top of its game, the show looks a lot like this. A love letter to both camp and horror, while still letting each character experience real, human moments that remind us of why we fell in love with it in the first place.
Wanted to say goodbye. Goodbye. I'm going to roll.
If Asylum is frequently ranked as the best season of American Horror Story, then Hotel, which usually falls on the bottom of the pack, is its direct inverse. The season is based loosely on several hotel-related horror stories, including H.H. Holmes' Murderous Hotel, where the serial killer kept his victims during the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, and the 2013 disappearance of Elisa Lam at LA's Cecil Hotel. With Jessica Lange's exit at the end of the previous season, the show had yet another hurdle to overcome. Who would serve as the leading lady? And though Lady Gaga offered up an admirably campy turn as the vampiric countess, it couldn't save an uneven season that tried a little too hard and muddled its own story time and time again. After all, would it even be American Horror Story if it didn't have too many arcs and way too many unlikable characters?
Who the hell are you people?
The premiere remains the worst episode of what many viewers consider one of the worst seasons, if only for its best-known scene, a violent sequence during which Gabriel, played by New Girl's Max Greenfield, is sodomized by a monster known as the Addiction Demon. Critics and fans alike viewed this as exploitative and unnecessary, and it became clear that while American Horror Story was usually a guilty pleasure, this season might be abandoning the word pleasure entirely. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite TV shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.